What's up, guys? The day has come. Erik Karlsson is finally a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins, but it had to take three teams to make it happen. So here are the details. Erik Karlsson, forward Rem Pitlick from the Montreal Canadiens, and forward Dylan Hamaliuk, and San Jose's 2026 third round pick head to Pittsburgh. San Jose acquires Pittsburgh's 2024 first round pick, which is top 10 protected forward Mikael Granlund, defenseman Jan Rutta, and forward Mike Hoffman from the Montreal Canadiens. And Montreal acquires Pittsburgh's 2025 second round pick, defenseman Jeff Petry, who played for Montreal for many years. He goes back to Montreal, and goaltender Casey DeSmith alongside Nathan Legare.
Legare.
Legare, whatever. So, in terms of how this deal happened, well, for weeks now, we've been hearing that Pittsburgh and the Carolina Hurricanes are going after Erik Karlsson. Ultimately, Tony DeAngelo gets bought up by Philly. Carolina signs him, so it kind of seemed dead in terms of Carolina acquiring Erik Karlsson. And then the favorite became Pittsburgh, which is ultimately what happened here. Um, in terms of the retention, $1.5 million of Carlson's salary, and Pittsburgh retains 25% of Petry's salary. But why did the Montreal Canadiens do this? Well, in terms of our perspective, the reason why Rem Pitlick and Mike Hoffman got traded is because there was a logjam in terms of forwards in Montreal, and they had to free some forwards up to make room for guys like Harvey Pinard playing full time with the Montreal Canadiens, along with other forwards that are making a push from the AHL to the NHL or other prospects that want a shot at making the Canadiens lineup this fall. So here's a statement that was written by the Canadiens. So there's no salary being retained by Montreal in either Pitlick or Hoffman. The Canadiens initially traded Petry in July of 2022 without retaining salary, along with paying for Matheson and a fourth. They're getting him back at 4.69 million, 25% retained by Pittsburgh, along with the other pieces that I mentioned before. There's a strong chance that the Canadiens will trade Petry, if not before the start of the season, then by the deadline. Believe they've already been working on it. Not retaining salary on Hoffman or Pitlick was key for Montreal in this. They have open retention spots, and retaining 50% of Petry's contract turns Petry into $2.34 million cap hit this season and next. That could open up a wider market for his services. He has a 15-team no trade list and will have no consider being flexible with it if he doesn't wish to return to Montreal. But Montreal was not on his no trade list. As of right now, he's a Canadian, and if he remains a Canadian with them on when the season starts, he still improves their right side D. I think that's how the Canadians see it. In terms of DeSmith coming in as security, as a position of need, with Primo having to go through waivers if he doesn't make the Canadians out of camp. Either way, his addition creates flexibility for the Canadians. Maybe it opens them up to an Allen trade down the line, especially if Primo unseats him at camp. Bottom line, if they lose a goalie, they have another one with NHL experience in the fold. Now, also, it's a possibility and not necessarily a likelihood, but certainly a possibility they'll carry on with three goaltenders on the roster to start the season. As for moving Pitlick and Hoffman out, Pitlick was open to another opportunity after the way his season went down last season, very inconsistent. Playing games the Rocket and Montreal, and Hoffman had to go. Obviously, we know his game has not been there since joining the Canadians, and his contract was not the prettiest. The Canadians have freed up space for young players ultimately at the end. So, Luca, what are your thoughts on this trade with the Canadians being involved? San Jose, getting it done, moving Karlsson, making him happy. He goes to a contender in Pittsburgh. We all know that Letang and Crosby were pushing for Karlsson to get traded to Pittsburgh. How do you view all three teams in this trade?
Well, I'm going to start off and firstly say that the Penguins are getting themselves a Norris Trophy winner in Erik Karlsson, a guy who's going to be their first line power play guy. He's going to be a fantastic addition to that blue line. Now, look, Erik Karlsson is more offensive than he is defensive. They're not expecting him to be a defensive monster They're expecting it more to help in the offensive side of things, which I think they're going to do. And Pittsburgh's going for a cup here. They're sending a message. Kyle Dubas is sending a message to the league basically saying that they believe that they have a team to win a cup, and I think adding a guy like Erik Karlsson shows that. In terms of Rem Pitlick, just pretty quickly, I mean, listen, kind of like what you mentioned before, he kind of fell out of favor with Montreal. He was at a point in his career where he was healthy scratched. He wasn't really playing. He even got sent down to Laval for a brief period where he did really well. But there just was no room for him. And with everybody coming up and with how well some of the guys played, it felt like Rem Pitlick's time in Montreal was coming to an end shortly. And it turns out that it actually has. He gets an opportunity in Pittsburgh where, kind of like Ryan Poehling did last year in the trade with Mike Matheson, where him and Petry were sent to Pittsburgh. He's got an opportunity in Pittsburgh to kind of, play a third, fourth line role for them and see if he can, potentially find his game again and be a good, serviceable bottom six forward for them. So I'm excited to see what he does in Pittsburgh. In terms of what San Jose gets, listen, they do well considering the circumstances. I mean, look, they acquire a first-round pick. I know it's top 10 protected. I don't know the full conditions other than that, but top 10 protected first-round pick. They acquired three NHL players, essentially. Jan Rutta, who's a serviceable top six defenseman, I think is going to play a decent role for the Sharks. I think he's going to help them out. And then you get Granlund and Hoffman. Now, Granlund and Hoffman have had their fair share of issues, both with the Penguins and with the Montreal Canadiens, respectively. But Mike Hoffman's a guy that can score 20 goals if, given the right line mates and given the right opportunity. He's not really a guy that's going to be good defensively. Listen, I've had my opinions of Mike Hoffman. Everybody knows, if you've watched this podcast, my feelings on him. At the end of the day, I just don't think it worked out in Montreal. I think he was put in a very tough position when he signed that contract, and he just didn't live up to his contract, pretty much during his time here. And I think there was just too many factors that played into it. I think Hoffman gets a fresh start in San Jose. I think if you put him in the top six role, maybe with Thomas Hertl and Logan Couture, he might be able to find a scoring touch. I could see him potentially scoring 20 goals. Granlund, kind of the same thing. He's a guy that, again, went to Pittsburgh, kind of struggled, just didn't fit the mold. I think he's got an opportunity in San Jose to go and kind of turn around his career a little bit. And at $5 million, I mean, he's got to prove it a little bit more. So I think for San Jose, there's definitely an opportunity here where Granlund and Hoffman could be good, serviceable NHLers for them and still play big roles. As for Montreal, this deal makes a shit ton of sense to me, in my opinion. And the reason why is because, look, everyone's surprised that Jeff Petry came back, myself included. I don't think he's going to play for the Canadiens. I think before the season starts, he likely gets flipped. There was talk last year that he got traded because he had asked for a trade and his wife didn't want to be there. I don't see him playing a game for the Canadiens. If he does, I'd be very surprised. But either way, if this is just a move to retain more salary and essentially get some more assets back, I think I'm all for it. Casey DeSmith's an interesting one. DeSmith last year, took the reins when Tristan Jarry got injured, struggled a lot during that. Struggled at periods. Didn't really have the best season, but I think he needed a fresh start. And look, for $1.8 million on one more year, it puts Montreal in a very interesting position because they have three goaltenders on the roster, and if you count Caden Primo, they have four, right? So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in training camp. I have a feeling Montreal probably goes with three goaltenders. I also wouldn't be surprised if Jake Allen or Caden Primo likely get moved before the season starts. Primo's got a tough position to be in now, considering that he basically needs to prove that he deserves to be the backup. And with having two really good NHL goaltenders next to him, it's going to be tough to see how that goes. But DeSmith, he's a serviceable NHLer. I think him and Montembeault, if they were to be the tandem, I think would be a decent tandem for this season. So I'm curious to see what happens. And it allows, like I said, it opens up the possibility for a Jake Allen trade. Habs also acquire a second-round pick in 2025. Good move by Kent Hughes. He picks up a second-rounder, which is a steal. And Nathan Legare, I mean, listen, he's a prospect, probably going to play in the AHL, not more than that. So I think ultimately, out of all of this, Montreal gains about $800K in cap space, which, again, the point of this deal for the Canadiens was to trade Hoffman and Pitlick, and they did exactly that. The point of this deal for the Penguins was to acquire Erik Karlsson and get him on retained salary. Now, the problem is that he still makes $10 million for the next 4 seasons. So Pittsburgh is really, really looking at this as an opportunity where they need to win a cup here. If they don't win a cup with Erik Karlsson, it's going to be tough to look at this trade and say that it's a good deal. And for San Jose, I mean, it's an underwhelming return under the circumstances. I think they probably could have gotten better, but like I said before, they still acquired a first round pick, although it's top 10 protected. You know, they get three NHLers, and to get three NHLers in a trade nowadays is not very easy. The only other time that happened was the Winnipeg Jets and the LA Kings for Pierre-Luc Dubois. So I know they're not the best NHL players, but it's guys that have proven themselves in the NHL, and I think with the right change of scenery could do well. So I like it for all three teams. I think all three teams did well under the circumstances. I think if I had to give a winner, I'd probably give it to the Penguins, just simply for the fact that they get themselves the Norris Trophy winner, and they also bolster their team in other assets with a third round pick, Hamaliuk, and obviously Rem Pitlick. I would say that the Canadiens came out really, really well in this, and San Jose, although they weren't probably the winner out of all three of the teams, they still got a decent return under the circumstances they were dealt with, and considering Erik Karlsson had a no move clause and really much decided where he wanted to go.
Well, look, this is not the first time the Hoffman gets traded to San Jose. Ottawa didn't want to
Yeah,
trade him within the East a couple years ago, and they traded him to San Jose, and then San Jose flipped him ultimately to
yeah,
the Florida Panthers, right? So it's funny how he ends up back in San Jose after all these years. But in terms of San Jose, they're giving players that have an opportunity here to prove themselves that they're still capable of playing at the
yeah,
NHL level consistently, and that they still have something left in the tank. Mike Hoffman is going to be a UFA at the end of the season, so they could easily get assets for him at the trade deadline or during the season. Same thing with Jan Ruda. They could flip him at the deadline, and he's a serviceable defenseman, and he has an extra year left past this season. So they could get some assets here. They have a lot of UFAs on this lineup that they could potentially move and get assets, since they're a rebuilding team and they're trying to reshape this team into a contending team like they once were a couple of years ago. In terms of the Pittsburgh Penguins, all these moves that Dubas has been making since being the president and now GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins shows that they are in win now mode. This team on paper is a contender, potentially maybe even a cup favorite for some. This team could do serious damage not only during the season but also during the playoffs. But as you can see, a lot of these players are past the age of 30 years old, and they're in the twilight years of their career. So now is the time to win the Stanley Cup. If it's not this year, the next, because some of these guys still have a term left on their contracts. So the window is very, very small for the Pittsburgh Penguins to win a cup, but now is the time to get it done. And in terms of the Montreal Canadiens, just looking at their team here, they get Jeff Petry back. Whether he plays a game or not, it's still an asset for Montreal to move. He's worth a lot less now compared to when the Canadians traded him, and even then it was kind of hard to make that work with his cap hit. But they still got Mike Matheson, who's one of the most underrated defensemen. Now it's funny that there's potential now that both these players who were traded for each other could start the season and play alongside each other. So that's pretty interesting, since Mike Matheson is a left-handed defenseman and Petry's a right-handed defenseman. But also logjam in terms of forward depth for Montreal. They had to move some wingers, and I wouldn't be surprised if Yoel Armia is next, or maybe a center like Christian Dvorak could be next. There's teams that are desperate for a center, such as the Boston Bruins, who don't have Bergeron because he retired, and Krejci is probably going to announce his retirement shortly. But I do believe this is, you know, a blockbuster of a trade. There's no doubt about it. But well deserved in terms of the wait for many NHL fans. It got really, really stale and boring in terms of information. Not a lot of moving parts these last couple of weeks, and bam, on a Sunday morning or afternoon, wherever you guys are, we get hit with one of the biggest trades of the year or the last couple of years. There's no doubt about it, and I think most of us are walking away here very um, pleased
surprised.
with the return for most for most of these teams in this trade. I know a lot of Montreal Canadiens fans are happy with this trade. A lot of Pittsburgh Penguin fans are happy with this trade. San Jose, yeah, maybe it's a little bit more underwhelming, but again, you had Granlund, Rutta, Hoffman. Those are assets you could trade for and get, you know, younger assets in terms of prospects or younger players, or also, draft picks that
Yeah,
you can use to draft in later drafts, and also getting a first round pick, sweetens the deal here. But at the end of the day, this trade had to happen for all these reasons that we listed. Every single team did exactly what had to be done. They all fulfilled needs, even though, you know, maybe for one out of the three teams didn't necessarily get exactly what they're hoping for. But when Carlson says to you, "I do not want to play here anymore," after like having a phenomenal season last year and winning the Norris when no one expected that, you're gonna have to make him happy, because the San Jose Sharks have been rebuilding for a while here, and
yeah,
he wants to win. He wants to win a Stanley Cup. He's won the Norris a couple of times. Now it's for him to go out and chase the main goal here, which is winning a Stanley Cup. And I think that's every single player's dream. So
agreed.
going to Pittsburgh, fulfills that goal for Erik Karlsson. Will it happen? We shall see. But it definitely strengthens the possibility of that happening. I know there's a lot of memes here going on with Jeff Petry going back to the Montreal Canadiens, but and everyone's saying that Ken Hughes, uh, again, finds himself implementing players that had to be traded, and implementing himself in a blockbuster deal once again. And they got rid of Drouin this offseason as well. A lot of moving pieces. Edmondson was another guy. The Canadians are really going for a younger squad this upcoming
But not
season.
only not only that, I think what's interesting about the Canadians first and foremost is the fact that like you mentioned, Kent Hughes is implicating himself into trades, but it's also the fact that he's looking at this and he's looking at opportunities to strengthen his team and make it better. And although Jeff Petry isn't the main piece in this deal, right, for the Canadians, this is huge because it allows them now to potentially, like I said before, flip him. But not only that, it also puts Pittsburgh in a really good position because they needed to get rid of Petry in order to acquire Erik Karlsson. So this just puts Pittsburgh in a really good position because now you've been able to move Petry, you've been able to move Casey DeSmith, you were able to move Granlund and Jan Rutta. So yeah, that's probably half your squad right there moved out. But you're acquiring a defenseman like Erik Karlsson, who, let's be honest, last year had probably the best season we've seen him have since his days in Ottawa. And he's going to a team that is offensively gifted with Sidney Crosby, with Evgeny Malkin. Obviously, Jake Hensel's out, so he's not going to be there for the start of the year. But with Chris Letang as a D partner, like that is absolutely incredible. And to see the Penguins make this deal, and I know some Penguins fans might be disappointed. Oh, it's only 13% retained. Yeah, but if you win the cup, it doesn't matter. And I think that's what Kyle Dubas is looking at, going, he's got an opportunity here where he didn't do it in Toronto, right? This isn't a deal that I think if he was still in Toronto would have been made. I think the fact that he's in Pittsburgh and he was given the opportunity and he was given a free reins to kind of come in and be the GM and be the president of hockey ops and have full reins on what goes on, I think it allowed him to come in and make a deal. Now, this is probably the biggest blockbuster we've seen. I don't think we've seen a bigger blockbuster than this. I don't even think the Kachuk trade was a bigger blockbuster than this because there was so many big pieces. Even if, don't get me wrong, the quality of the players is probably less than what the Kachuk deal was. I mean, Jeff Petry, NHLer, Casey DeSmith, NHLer, Erik Karlsson, NHLer, Hoffman, Granlund, Rutta, all the NHL players, and then a first-round pick as well being thrown in there, a second rounder and a third rounder. Like, these are all big pieces. This is not like a small minor trade. This is a huge blockbuster trade, and all three teams are benefiting from it. And two of them are rebuilding. One of them is a team battling for the playoffs. So I think everybody did well here. I think that you got to give credit to all three of them, all three GMs. Obviously, for Mike Greer, listen. At the end of the day, he got a first round pick. So for me, I think that's a big win in a draft that I think is going to be pretty stacked as well. And for Kent Hughes, I mean, look, credit where credit's due. If you can get another asset for Jeff Petry, that's fantastic. If not, I mean, listen, Petry wasn't bad when he was here in Montreal. I think it's an opportunity for him to get a chance to see what he can do. Look, the young guys like him. Caulfield was a fan of him. They were good friends. Suzuki was a good friend with him. So there's still that level of closeness there. Obviously, Jeff Petry, the biggest issue was his wife didn't want to be there. So I don't know how that's going to work if he does end up staying in Montreal. But I do think Montreal, and according to rumors, it looks like they're already working on having Jeff Petry traded sooner rather than later. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say.
And the last thing I would like to say in terms of final details to this trade, uh, expect Mike Hoffman and Granlund to be slotted in the top six. They're going to try to maximize their value as much as possible to try to flip them for assets. And Jan Rutta, he's going to be playing in the top six in terms of defensemen, because once again, they're going to want to juice up his trade value. And in terms of the highest contract on Pittsburgh, it is now Erik Karlsson. And just looking at also what the Canadians did last year with Mike Matheson, they officially got him for free because
Yeah.
Paling's no longer with the Pittsburgh Penguins, is with Philly, and Jeff Petry's back with the Montreal Canadiens. So that's pretty interesting. And they did manage to clear up some cap space, the Pittsburgh Penguins, but they also took back a lot. So they cleared $14 million, but they ended up taking back $11.1 million ultimately at the end of the day. But guys, I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Who won this massive blockbuster of a deal? The Pittsburgh Penguins, the Montreal Canadiens, or the San Jose Sharks, or all winners at the end of this deal? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And we'll see you in the next episode of the Young Guns podcast. Potentially, maybe Jeff Petry being flipped, or another player that we do not expect to be traded will be moved. But we'll see what happens, guys. It seems like the tires are finally starting to roll here, and we might see some more unexpected trades as the season starts back in October. So we'll hear from you guys shortly, and I hope you guys enjoy this trade breakdown. See you guys soon.